How's it going, everyone? This is Peter from CodeBoost, and in this tutorial we're going to take a look at JavaScript scroll animations. We're going to be building something similar to this where we can scroll down the page and our elements will animate into view. This code is going to work for vanilla JavaScript. It's also going to work if you're using a library like React. We're going to be using the same code, so however we set it up here should work in your application as well. And let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so for this tutorial, we are going to be using an HTML file. We're going to be writing in vanilla JavaScript. And I think the best way to start this is going to be actually to use some buttons rather than some images like we saw in the preview earlier. And just because I don't really want to have to find some more source attributes for our images, but button will work just as good. In fact, any element will work for this scroll animation. Let's go ahead and add 4 buttons here. We'll give each of them a separate label just so we know which button's which. And we'll go ahead and save and drop this HTML file into the browser. See our buttons here. Now this is not going to be enough for us because we actually want to have our elements a little bit separated down the page. We don't want them to all animate it at once. So go into the head of your document, add a style element, and we will select all the buttons. And first of all, we're going to want to make them display block. So I'll just put them each on their own line. You can also go ahead and add a margin bottom. Let's separate them a little bit, just that way we can see the different animations happening at different times. And another thing we can do, we can bump up the font size. Let's make this 40 pixels. You can also add some padding. I'm going to add 20 pixels of padding. And maybe we'll also center these buttons. So add a margin left auto as well as a margin right auto. I think that should be enough. So let's save, refresh. All right, awesome. So we've got our elements are staggered down the page. One last thing we can do also is add some padding above this first element just to see what's going on. And so if we select the body tag and add a padding top of 1000 pixels, then if we go ahead and save that and refresh, okay, perfect. So this is enough above the page, that way we can have each of our animations run enough above the elements rather. And now that we have this lined up, let's go ahead and add a script tag underneath our buttons. And here's where we're going to do our animation triggering logic. So the first thing we're going to want to do is select all of our button elements, and we can use document.querySelectorAll, and we'll grab all the buttons on the page. And for this animation, we're going to need a scroll event listener. So go ahead and add window.addEventListener, and we'll pass in scroll is going to be the event listener we want. And this also takes in an arrow function or any type of function. And how this works is every time we scroll down or up the page, we will get this function to run. So we can actually test it out real quick. Let's check out our button elements. Go ahead and save and refresh and open up your console. And you'll notice that as we scroll down the page, we get a new node list, and that's this is just our scroll animation or our scroll event listener running. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that console log. For our animation, we are going to want to know where these elements are on the page so we can know when to trigger them. One way we can do that is to figure out the top value using the getBoundingClientRect method. So this method just grabs some values from each element, and it will tell you where the top is, where the bottom is, the left, the right, the width, the height. It's a bunch of numbers, and the only one we need is the top. So go ahead and make a variable for the top, and we'll actually, before we do this, we're going to need to loop over all of our buttons. So grab your button elements, and we'll use a for each method. We will pass the name button in for each of our node list items, and we will go ahead and say the top of each button is that button with the get bounding client rect method I told you about. and then we'll take the top value. This get bounding client rect returns an object that has a bunch of values on it. We really only need the top, so we'll do that one. And I'm going to go ahead and console log out this top value so we can see it. And we'll save, refresh, open up our console again. We'll see some numbers here. This number here is going to be our first button, our second button, third button, fourth button. And maybe we'll lower this a little bit just so we see 4. But you'll notice here all these values are positive until those elements scroll above the page. So as this element 1 goes out of the view, it becomes negative. See, as the element 2 goes out of view, this number becomes negative. So this is going to be crucial in how we tell our web page to trigger our animation. And another value we'll actually want to have handy is the window dot inner height. So if we go ahead and save and refresh, we'll see there's a second number here. This is the height in pixels between the top and the bottom of the page. And it stays constant as long as the window is the same. So how we can use this, let's go ahead and delete this console log. We don't really need it. And we're going to want a conditional now. So let's add an if statement. And we can say if the top is less than the window inner height. So if that number that became negative when it went out of view is less than this height, that's how we can tell it to start the animation at the bottom. So this if statement, which I haven't opened yet, will become true as the element scrolls into view above the bottom of the page. And at this point, then we can have our animation work. So let's go ahead and create that animation now. In your styles, in your CSS styles, make it keyframes animation. I'm actually just going to call it fade in up. And the starting state for this, we will have the opacity be none to start. And I'm also going to translate Y, this to 50 pixels down. And for this, we're going to do an animation where each of these elements will slide up and fade in. So we'll start a little down and opacity 0. And we will end it with opacity 1 and translate Y of 0 pixels. And now we can apply this animation. So take your button, and on the class list we are going to use the add method, and we will add that fade. Oh, we're actually going to need to make a class for this as well. So underneath this we will add the fade in up class, and this will have the animation property with that keyframe. And we'll just start it out with 0.3 seconds. We can change this later if need be. And we'll also add the both property. And what this both property will do is at the end of the animation, the element will keep the 100% styles rather than revert back to the 0% styles, which it would do if we didn't use this property. So very useful in animations. And we can go ahead and add this class list when that element comes into view. So let's go ahead and save and scroll up, give it a refresh. Actually, one more thing I just remembered. We're also going to want to have those buttons have the opacity 0 and have that translate Y value at 50 pixels to start. That way we can actually see them fade in. Save and refresh at the top of the page, and we can see here our animation is working. This is great. This is what we're looking for. There is one tweak I think we can make. The animation is starting at the very bottom. I think it'll be a better effect if we bump this up and have the animation start closer or a little above the bottom. So we can go over to our if statement, and if we go ahead and subtract say like 50 from here, then if we go ahead and save and refresh, we'll see our animation is a little smoother. It is going a little fast, so I think we can also change this to 0.7 seconds. That should be a little better. So I'm going to save and refresh again, and perfect. We've got our animation. Here we go. This is what we're looking for. Get that nice fade in up. We can do it with whatever elements we like. And this is what we're looking for. Although there is one more caveat that I do want to point out. This will work fine if the user starts at the top, but if the user is somewhat down the page and hits refresh, or if those elements are already in view, you'll notice that animation happens again. I don't think this is a great effect. I think it would be better if we only animated in elements that came from the bottom of the page, and if an element was already on the page, we don't apply that animation. So this will be a quick fix. We can also adjust our logic here for that. So if you go under your button elements, we're actually going to do another for each over our button elements. And this is going to be somewhat similar logic to below. We're going to say for each button. And similar enough, we can actually grab this top value here. The top that we're looking for is going to be the same. And we can actually even also grab this if conditional. We are going to want to apply a certain class if the element's already on the page. You notice before when we refresh, the animation happens. That's because this is being applied. But we don't want this to be applied initially. And this is running at the start of our, right when we load our web page. So instead of fade in up here, I think we can add a different class. Let's call this one already on page. So these elements were getting animated initially, and we're going to add a class here already on page to prevent that from happening. We can even also add an else to this conditional. We can say if it's not on the page yet, then we can just say not on page. And so this will this second class will apply if that element is not yet in view. So we can add some CSS code for these classes. We can say already on page and not on page. And so if it's already on the page, then we just want the end state of this animation. So we can go ahead and copy this here. We don't actually need to animate it. And if it's not yet on the page, we want it to still be ready to be animated. So we'll want these values, and we should actually take these from the button here. Let's cut it from the button instead, because otherwise they'll apply to this one as well. It will get overwritten, but I think this is a little cleaner. And so now if the element is not on the page, then it won't apply the animation. So this is the CSS we need to get this working properly. We actually also need to go back down to our scroll event listener. We're going to need to add another conditional because we don't want this class, this fade in up class, to apply to the elements if they have the class of not on page, excuse me. We only want this to apply to elements that are not yet on the page. So the way we can do this is let's go ahead and add a different condition, a second condition with our double and here. And we will say if the button dot class list dot contains, we'll use contains this time, not on page. And so this will only run the animation if the element's not yet in view. So if we go ahead and give it a save, give it a refresh, we'll see our elements didn't animate that time. This is what we're looking for. They did slide down. I'm not sure why they're doing that. Never mind. All right, we're working. This is working good. All right, so we'll go to the top. We'll give it a refresh. Our animation's working. If we refresh from here, our elements are perfectly in view and they're not animated. Although the fourth element here, since it wasn't in view, does get animated. Awesome. So this is the effect we're looking for. We've got a scroll animation, and we've even accounted for elements that are already on the page. So here's our finished code here. And if you are using React for your application, there is a quick way to translate this code over to React. I know this isn't in React, but I'm gonna write this out real quick. If you've ever used the React.useEffect hook, then we can use the componented mount version, or just adding an empty array here as the second argument. And if we were to cut this code over into our useEffect hook in our React component, then it will be the exact same thing as running a script. And so that's how you can have this effect work in your React applications as well. So that is the scroll animation tutorial, how to trigger scroll animations on Vue. Hope you liked this video. I hope you got something out of it. If you did like it, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you like this video and want to watch more, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We've got plenty more videos coming. And thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day.